Thanks everyone for joining us again. It's Elizabeth Miller, Functional Medicine Health Coach, and Dr. Erin Morland, owner and practitioner at Valeo Health and Wellness Center in Eden Prairie. If you haven't been watching our videos yet, we highly encourage you to go back and start from the beginning just so that you can get a better idea of what Alzheimer's is and what this video series is really about. So today, in particular, we are focusing on type 1.5 Alzheimer's. So if you could start us off telling us a little bit more about type 1.5.
And I think one place I want to start with is why 1.5 or 1.5 versus why is it not just called 2?
Yeah.
Dr. Dale Bredesen, that's what he named it. I'm not sure exactly why he named it that, other than my thoughts is that it's one disease that's driving Alzheimer's, so it's really focused on a different disease, and so maybe that's why that's labeled that, but it's really not that important when you think about it, because we're looking at 6 different types of Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's isn't just one type of an issue. There's 6 different reasons why someone would have it. And I think that we don't want to get caught too much in, like, because the books, if you look at scientific books, medical literature, they haven't really categorized these 6. Dr. Dale Bredesen has just done it. But really what we're going to be talking about today is the underlying issue with blood sugar that drives Alzheimer's. So that's really what type 1.5 is. And then just not to help people not get too confused, is we may talk about the term type 3 diabetes, and so again, that's not the type of Alzheimer's, but some people would classify this blood sugar issue that's happening in the brain just as type 3 diabetes.
Okay, good to know. So knowing that this type 1.5 Alzheimer's is really a blood sugar issue, can you talk a little bit about type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes and where it fits into
just to help
everything?
people to understand. Type 1, it used to be called juvenile, but now we're seeing it happening in adults as well, because it's an autoimmune condition where your body will actually destroy the cells that make insulin, or what will happen is your body will actually destroy the insulin that you make. And so now these people don't have insulin, they can't get the blood sugar, like when they eat sugar, they can't get that sugar out of their blood because they have no insulin to do so. So they literally have to take insulin, okay? So that's type 1. And so you may see kids that are having to use insulin pumps. People may have been around that when they were kids, or maybe they see that today. You're seeing it, numbers actually going up, more prevalent. And so type 2 diabetes, though, is where the body becomes resistant. Person's releasing so much insulin that what's happening is that the cells, the receptors, actually resist that insulin, and so now that insulin's less effective, and so they could have high amounts of insulin and they'll have high amounts of sugar because they can't get that into their cells. Like, so my wife's grandma was insulin resistant, or a type 2 diabetic, and when I was just starting chiropractic school, I think she thought I knew more than I did, because I remember her coming up to me, hey, my blood sugar is like 400 and something, and
oh, wow.
Is that good? And I'm thinking, well, she's diabetic, she's probably been doing this for many years, she probably sounds like she knows what she's doing. I'm like, well, I guess, if you're not too concerned by it, I guess that's probably fine. And then I remember driving home with my wife saying, hey, your grandma said her blood sugar is 400 something, and my wife said, no, that's terrible.
Oh my gosh.
So anyways, what they need to do is they need to typically take something that would make those receptors of the cell more receptive to blood sugar. So they may be taking drugs like metformin to do so. So that's type 2. Now type 3 really falls probably more in the category of type 2. And so a lot of times people that have type 2 diabetes, what happens is they are more at risk for Alzheimer's disease, just because of all the different things that can happen with type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
But you can literally, with type 3 diabetes, you can do all the blood work on a person, it looks normal, but they are having blood sugar, or insulin resistance, but it's just happening in the brain. So just the cells of the brain are resistant to that insulin, and so then they can't get that sugar into their cells.
Okay, so being that the blood tests come back normal for type 3 a lot of the time. What would be some indicators that that's going on?
Yeah, good question, because if you don't have a blood test
Right,
that
how
can
are you
show
gonna
you,
know?
yeah, how would you know? And so some of the things you want to look for in understanding blood sugar, first thing I think I want to talk about is there's such a term as hypoglycemic, which means your blood sugar is too low.
Right.
And the symptoms that those people would experience would be they're fatigued before a meal, or irritable. They're that hangry. We talked about it before. That Snickers commercial. You're not yourself when you're hungry. So they have that. They may be jittery. They may be shaky. Have even tremors from it. But then when they do eat, they get energized. That hangriness goes away.
Yeah.
So that's hypoglycemic. And just for the people to know is that a lot of times people start that way. They become type 2 diabetics, meaning that they have poor blood sugar control, and they actually switch to the other thing would be hyperglycemic, which would be too much blood sugar.
Right.
And so symptoms that a person might have for that is they may notice that they're actually fatigued after they eat. So they may be tired before they eat, but definitely they get worse. They have to nap right after they eat. They may notice that, hey, I'm starting to get like a lot of brain fog, can't really think straight. They might, my memory's not as good as it used to be. They might notice that kind of the classic one is having to go to the bathroom a lot.
Okay.
But those would be more like your type 2 diabetes. And so again, your question was, well, how about a type 3? That's where you'd start to notice a lot more brain stuff. Okay, and those brain stuff would again be more poor memory.
Okay.
They might notice that they start reading and they get fatigued after reading for just 5 to 10 minutes. They got to take a nap after they've been reading. They may notice some balance type of issues. They may notice that hey, I'm having trouble finding words, or I'm using the wrong words that I never used to. So those are some of the things, but definitely when they have that tendency towards Alzheimer's, it's going to be more. They're going to notice my memory is just getting more and more worse. And so what happens then is that it literally could be because of blood sugar issues, even though their blood tests are normal.
Okay, interesting. And one of the terms I've heard a lot about is like AGEs or AGEs. Can you talk about how that's related to?
Yep, an AGE is just an acronym for what happens when blood sugar, you have too much blood sugar. It's literally poison to our bodies, and it can do damage to cells. It's kind of like rust on a car. And so what happens then is there's certain parts of our body, certain things in our body that will attack, and one of the things that can happen is it can really impact our brain, so that sugar molecule will actually bind to certain cells and then cause damage to those cells. So one of the ones that we can actually measure is hemoglobin A1C. And so hemoglobin A1C is just a hemoglobin that's got glucose attached to itself, cause damage to that hemoglobin, and so you can get a good idea of what sugar is doing to damage the inside of someone's body by getting that blood marker done.
Any other blood markers or things that we would be looking for?
Yeah, so hemoglobin's A1C is one that we'd look for to see if someone's, if their number's too high, we know, hey, they got too much glucose in their blood. The nice thing about the hemoglobin A1C is it can measure over the last 120 days.
Okay, wow.
But the other ones that are typically tested for are blood sugar. That's probably the gold standard. If someone's blood sugar is too high, they'll say that pre-diabetic or diabetic. So if you're between 110 and 126 or 125, they'd say you're pre-diabetic if you're over 126. And this is if the person's fasted for 12 hours. Then they're considered diabetic.
Okay.
But the problem with that test is I think that test is not very sensitive, meaning that you could have really high insulin levels driving that down, but your blood sugar would look normal. So I really think the best test is actually to measure people's insulin levels. So when you look at those levels, hemoglobin A1C should not be more than 5.6. We really look at blood sugar should not be, if they're fasted, should not be over 100, and then insulin should not be over 4.5. Again, if someone's fasted. And so when you look at those, again, I look at insulin being should be the gold standard, but it's not. And unfortunately, I don't know why it's not. I used to think it was because it was an expensive test, but I know we can run that test for like $35. So
so
it's really not a test that it costs a lot, and so I think everybody should be having their insulin levels checked.
Yeah, great point. One of the last questions that I have for you is, if it sounds like this is a very manageable thing. The blood sugar, it's not necessarily easy, but manageable. So what would be one of the surefire things that someone could do to really help prevent type 1.5 Alzheimer's, or just to help manage their blood sugar?
Yeah, good question. And I think that we've talked about this before. We said there's going to be specific videos that we're going to make, and that's definitely going to be one, because like you said, it may be somewhat simple, not easy, but there's still some things that we really want to help people to really understand, because we're going to go into talking about specific diets, like we'd talked about someone with hypoglycemic. Typically at first those people would need to be eating like more of those frequent meals, but that's not where we want to leave them, because that's really not the ideal for them. And then when we look at understanding the brain can burn sugar and it can burn fat, so we want to talk about like a ketogenic or a modified ketogenic or just a higher fat diet, so we're going to talk about that. But I would say where people could definitely start, and it's again not necessarily easy, but it is simple, is to get rid of the extra sugar that people are eating. And I'm not just talking about like candy bars and pixie sticks.
Right.
What I'm talking about is even like the agave or adding honey and such. They're natural, but they're still high in sugar, and they can actually be causing a lot of these blood sugar issues.
Yeah. One I see a lot seems to be the brown rice sugar. Every time I go to the store and I pick up like a protein bar or something, one of the first ingredients is brown rice sugar, or brown rice syrup, I should say.
Yeah, so people kind of think, well, it's brown rice, it's natural, but it's still sugar, it's still added. Like really, you shouldn't have to add sugar to your food. If you're eating good, healthy food, it tastes great, you really don't need to be adding a bunch of sugar.
Yeah, I have to laugh because as a kid, we would have strawberries dipped in sugar.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because I remember one time I was watching my kids, and they had a friend over, and it was just me, and I don't know how they got me outside, but somehow they got me to go outside, lock the door, and then I could look through the patio door and see them with a big bag of sugar dipping their strawberries in there, eating their, and I was just like, and my thought first of all is, why do you got to add sugar to strawberries? But yeah, so anyways, you're right, it is an interesting way to eat it when it already has sugar inside of it.
Right,
so.
it's already nature's sugar.
Yes, exactly.
All right, well, like I said, that was the last question I had for you. If there's anything else you'd like to add, certainly feel free.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about is, when we look at controlling blood sugar, it's probably one of the most important things you can do. Not just for Alzheimer's, but it can help with cancer, it can help with heart disease, it can help with so many other illnesses. That this is one that, again, we're trying to make these videos so that people can have tools that they can use to help themselves either prevent, slow down, reverse Alzheimer's. And this one here is just, I think it's actually critical that this is one that people implement into their health. And again, whether they're prone to Alzheimer's or not, it's just something they should implement into their life.
Yeah, step one, just control blood sugar.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for the rest of our videos to learn more about the different types of Alzheimer's and what you can do.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks.